And Building Committee to order. Roll call, please.
Alderman Sorrentino. Alderman Jacob.
Here.
Alderman Woods.
Here.
Alderman Sismarski.
Here.
Alderman Roy Wesley. Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Here.
Alderman Catalano.
Here.
Alderman Messina.
Here. We have a quorum. Make a motion to approve the minutes from September 10th, 2020. That's my motion.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Report and recommendation, Illinois Route 83 traffic light study. Mr. Cage?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, we have a proposal in your packet. This is for the area of Route 83. Just bear with me. Get this working. We are all very aware of where Route 83 is, which apparently, oh, there we go. The clicker is not. Obviously, again, very briefly, Foster to the south. This is pretty much a 100-acre area. We all know that Nippon is going into, is under construction right here, Nippon Express. What you have before you is a study from an engineering firm that we have worked with before, and that is it, unless anyone has any questions.
Okay. Make a motion to approve the Illinois Route 83 traffic light study.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next, Thorndale Corridor Overlay Boundaries and Regulations. Okay, taking this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a very, I promise, a brief introduction. This is kind of, I know the committee is up to speed on the Thorndale Corridor Overlay. This will be going to the CDC, and I know that everybody remembers we have a subcommittee that met back in March, I believe, for the kickoff meeting for the UDO updates. Mr. Blue is here, as is Mr. Bond. I know Mr. Blue has a brief presentation. Essentially, COVID-19 changed things around in terms of meetings, as we all know. We have been in the process of drafting some of these changes to the UDO. Staff has reviewed some of them. We will be having more of the subcommittee meetings coming up very soon. But this is a pressing issue. I know that the committee has been made aware of some of the issues in the past. Very briefly, parking requirements and use requirements in the Thorndale Corridor Overlay are very restrictive, and restrictive for a reason. This works in certain areas very well, in other areas not so well. So with that, I will hand over to Mr. Blue, and thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you all. Good to see you again. As part of the UDO update, since the question of the Thorndale overlay is come to a head a little bit in terms of economic development opportunities, what we wanted to do tonight was to just give you the briefest of kind of context of where we've been, where we're going, and if you have any questions, we can certainly answer those, and maybe not. Yeah, that's cool. Can we just hit the next slide? There you go, see? Just as good as the button. So again, real quick, we'll talk about the background of where we've been and where we're going. We've been developing some preliminary ideas for the UDO update. Some of them have to do with the overlay, so just want to introduce those to you tonight, again, by way of context. If you have any question or discussion, that's what I'm here for. So next slide. You'll remember that before the UDO update came up, the whole question of the corridor was part of the comprehensive plan that we all did together. And so if we go to the next slide, just by way of refresher, you remember that the entire 390 corridor was one of the sub areas that we looked at. Next slide. We looked at some of the existing conditions and the challenges that were there. The challenges were really about the market. right? You'll recall, that the city has got the concept for the office corridor that's there. It's really a market that doesn't exist anymore. We talked about that during the comprehensive plan. We talked about the need to revisit the corporate Main Street and focus where development could happen. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we talked about the idea of signature developments and the way developments are happening in the region these days, right? And so these are some examples of some that have happened recently in the area and the way development is happening. It's really focusing more along interchanges than spreading along corridors. That's where the market is at, and that's where the recommendation of the plan was. If we go to the next slide, this is a graphic came right out of the plan. The idea was to keep the vision of the corporate Main Street in terms of that character and that quality of development, but to focus it around the four quadrants of the interchange, right? And you'll recall we kind of talked about where it might be and how big it is. The plan was a policy document, so the plan didn't decide this is exactly where it's going to go. The plan plants the seed, if you will, for the idea, and then it happens through the adoption of the new ordinance. So if we go to the next slide, you'll recall we were here in person in December, which was not too long before you couldn't do this anymore, and we were talking about updating the UDO and what was kind of the status of the UDO. So really briefly, if we'll go to the next slide, you'll see that the updating the corridor carried through in that process as a next step. And we just kind of revisit the idea here. Some of the form-based development approaches are not really appropriate in the market these days. One of the biggest issues was that the list of permitted uses in the UDO is really very restrictive from an economic development standpoint. There are a lot of folks out there trying to do a lot of interesting, innovative, and different things in the I district, but since it is almost entirely covered by the overlay, it's not possible for them to do that, and that's really hampering economic development. It was a finding in the plan, carried through to the assessment. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that we started talking about how are we going to do this. So now by way of a little bit of a preview, where are we? If we go to the next slide, we're in the process of the update. We've drafted some of the sections. We have a few left to draft. We're working with staff on evaluating them and getting them to be specific to what Wooddale needs before we bring them back to the steering committee. Some of those preliminary ideas are finding their way through with the corridor. So if we go to the next slide, you can see a couple of things here. One relates to the industrial zoning. The underlying industrial zoning allows a broader list of uses, which are more in keeping with the kind of economic development opportunities that the city is starting to see now. There's some uses in there we might want to not have because they're not as oriented towards a business park, towards an attractive type of development. That's the kind of balancing that we're looking at doing with the overlay. The other thing we're looking at doing is dealing with the character. How's it going to look, right? That was in the previous plan that had been done, was in the comprehensive plan. The idea carries through here, and the idea that there are going to be these gateway corridors where we're going to have a higher level of development quality, that's something that we're going to be working on. This has not been adopted yet. This has not been approved yet. This doesn't go anywhere till you all see it, but this is where the thinking is going. We just wanted to update you. The next slide is specific to the corridor. And so this is an idea about focusing around the interchange. So you see the blue line here kind of identifies what that area might be. This is not the final area. This is not even a recommendation at this point. This is kind of a think piece, but this is what we want to do. We feel good that the recommendation will help you focus the potential for a signature development like those that have developed elsewhere in the region around the interchange. And so again, the overlay would be reduced to basically something like that along the interchange, around the interchange, would have the same kind of quality and height of development, not height, but height of character of development as the overlay does now, but would be focused. The overlay on that whole southeast quadrant of Wooddale Road and the I-390, that would be removed from there and would allow, again, some of the economic development activities that you've seen interest in come through. So if we can go to the next slide. few points for consideration that we've been thinking through that we just wanted to share with you again, right? Some of this is repetitive, but to highlight, focusing the development around the interchange where development is happening these days. Allowing additional industrial uses in that balance of the overlay area so that you can get some of these businesses that are looking to come to town. And then refining the overlay, again, keeping that level of quality so that the gateway, that intersection or that interchange really becomes kind of the opportunity for the star development. Keeping the vision as we talked about in the plan, but moving it more towards the corridor, towards the interchange. The next slide just says discuss. So if there's any questions or anything else, Ed, or that I can share, that's what I'm here for.
Do we have any questions?
Oh, and I have a question.
Alderman Woods?
Wouldn't be a meeting without a question. So, first one is, so what's next steps and when is that gonna happen?
The logistics, I think I'd probably do better to have Mr. Cage speak to that.
So in terms of logistics, excuse me, this is just for informational purposes for the council to know that this has been published for discussions at the CDC meeting, next CDC meeting in October. Obviously, if there's a positive or a negative recommendation from that meeting, it'll come back to committee as normal, and then city council. So I would expect it would come back to you guys in November.
So this going to the, if I may, the CDC in October, the next meeting, so that's in a week?
That is the 19th of October.
So are they gonna get a little more meat and potatoes than the 4 slides that we saw? I don't know if it was 4, I'm just saying 4, it might have been 5.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so, all right. And is that the full-blown concept that's going to the CDC, or
So,
based on Tesca's study and all the work that they've been doing?
yeah, I think there's probably 2 components to this. One is the Thorndale Corridor overlay component, and I'll come back to that in a second. The other component is the UDO update. UDO update, as you guys know, that manual document is huge. That's going to come back and be talked about at the subcommittee meetings in the future. That is such a huge document that we'll have to come back and take that in chapters. So that's kind of like the big part of this. The Thorndale Corridor overlay, we have probably best explained, going back to the lot coverage discussion we had 3-4 years ago. When you get 4 or 5 requests for variances for lot coverage, then we took a look at it and said maybe there's an issue with the code. That's when we came back, we discussed it, committee and council. We made some modifications, which I think really served the residents well and has worked out well for the city. What we're seeing in the Thorndale Corridor overlay is a lot of negative and frustration with property owners, future property owners, that they have an I-1 zone property that they can't develop as an I-1 property. Some of those are I-1 properties and will remain so. So we have a lot of interest in this subject, and we've had a lot of interest in this subject for probably 6 months to a year. We have an applicant who is willing to come forward with a text amendment to propose some modifications to the Thorndale Corridor overlay. The reason they didn't, because that was when we started having the discussions about modifying the UDO. And so we have probably about between 5 and 10 requests for non-conforming uses to continue, grandfathered uses, in the Thorndale Corridor overlay because of the overlay. These are industrial properties that want to remain industrial and can't be used. Some of these uses, I know that the council has seen them, some of these uses are good uses, some of them not so much. The Thorndale Corridor overlay really is having a negative impact, in my opinion, on economic development. And when I say economic development, I'm talking about multiple properties in the industrial business park and industrial developers as well. So there's a lot of, I would say, frustration with the Thorndale corridor overlay. We're not, from a staff standpoint, we're not ready to throw it out because we think and we know the city spent a lot of time on it, spent a lot of time and money and effort developing it, but we think it's appropriate for a certain location, which we're still analyzing. But there's some properties, and two examples that come to mind: 640 Central, that developed for logistics building, and the Nippon Express building. You know, they were in the Thorndale corridor overlay. We had to call that out when they went through the PUD process. The 640 Central ran into problems with parking because the Thorndale corridor overlay wanted an extra 70-something parking spaces rather than the UDO. These are the things that create some tension, some unfavorable impressions, and if it was one case or two cases, I'd say those are unique. But what I'm seeing, and this is just my opinion, I'm seeing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these issues. That's why we're bringing it to you.
Yeah, if you continue.
All right, so I don't disagree that we need to make changes. My only concern is what those changes are, where they are, and who they affect, because that forces me to sit up here and kind of pick winners and losers. I don't like that position, although I know it's something that needs to be done. That being said, there's also people in the community have made decisions based on that overlay, and now that overlay will change. Might not change their decision because they've already invested money. So whatever we do, we need to do quickly, openly, so that everybody understands what's going on. Because to your point, there are a lot of people out there making decisions on this old map, and I don't want it to be 5 guys waiting in queue knowing this happens, that everybody in the community knows what's going on.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just,
Go ahead.
specifically to that point, the first step is going to be to remove the overlay requirements from certain of those locations, from where it is in the southeast quadrant, but not to place it onto other properties just yet. We'll do that with a longer process that spends time with the steering committee, just so that those concerns that you're raising get a longer vetting than this interim step to free up the opportunities for economic development.
Go to the Matt, we'll have to see.
Alderman Messina had his hand up before.
Alderman Woods asked it.
Oh, okay. Mayor?
So, the reason we had the steering committee was to vet certain things out, see what people are thinking, right? It was a combination of people in the community, electeds, so we can discuss what we like, what we don't like. Now we're going to CDC. Before the committee met once, and then because of COVID, right? And now we're going right to the CDC. Now, if we're looking to address parking things, I mean, we saw that was a problem right away. That's one thing. Changing the whole overlay district because of parking, or, you know, I guess what I'm saying is we're not really vetting this thing out properly. I mean, that's my concern. That's the only concern.
Mr. Cage?
Exceedingly key component and key question. We're not my opinion, we're not bypassing the steering committee. We've had some quirks, to say the least, and that's probably the understatement of the year, in terms of how we do business. The steering committee was set up, in my opinion, to oversee and to assist, because it's made up of members of this committee, plus, in addition to a number of residents and key stakeholders. We would never bypass that group simply because they all have key input to weigh in on the UDO. I guess, kind of taking a step back, I anticipate at least another 2 or 3 of those steering committee meetings. The issue that we have right now is that we have a number of people kind of waiting to see what the outcome of that process is. But the Thorndale corridor overlay has been an issue for quite some time. without getting into details, the mayor just mentioned the 640 North Central property. I know we've had other applications without going into details, some positive, some negative, that have been adversely affected by the Thorndale Corridor overlay. As Mr. Blue mentioned, we're not adding anyone into the Thorndale Corridor at this time. That's not the intent. That's a discussion for later on, which will be with the subcommittee group, and will come back, obviously, to the committee and the council. The key component that we have today is the Thorndale Corridor overlay is affecting industrial properties and not allowing them to develop as industrial properties. Now, I'm sure Mr. Bond has an opinion on that, and other attorneys do. Some may see it as a taking, some may not. From a practical standpoint, if I have an industrial building, two good examples, 850 and 950 Edgewood, the former Nippon Express buildings. They're industrial buildings. The new owner wants to use them as industrial buildings, and he has a list of uses in the Thorndale Corridor overlay, the corporate Main Street, that's about this long, which is about 5 uses. None of those uses fit what the buildings could be used for. So what is that individual to do with 2 buildings? Remember, this is the key component of the overall Nippon Express deal, which was them to relocate to the new facility, which is under construction, with the reconstruction of Bryn Mawr, and with the reuse of the 2 existing buildings. Right now, that owner is putting money into those 2 properties in terms of the parking lot to use the buildings, and really has a very restrictive use list of what they can go on. And that is one property owner of probably 5 to 10 that I can think of that is adversely affected by the Thorndale Corridor overlay. So we're not saying that this is a done deal. We're saying we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about this soon, because with everything that's going on, the good news is we're getting a lot of interest, we're getting a lot of economic development. If we allow the Thorndale Corridor overlay to stay as it stands without some modification and some more details, as Alderman Wood said, it's going to put a drag on that economic development. My concern is that economic development will walk away and go to some of our other neighboring communities.
Mayor, go ahead.
I'm not saying we're bypassing the committee.
No.
But, so we're going to CDC, and it sounds like we're gonna ask them to shrink the overlay district and add more items that are permissible in the district, is what it sounds like. But, I don't know, we haven't even had any discussion. I mean, I think there was a company came here, they wanted to do some truck repairs, and that's not allowed. We basically said no at that time because it's not allowed, right? It's the overlay. So I'm just trying to make sure, I'd like to know what the game plan is, because I don't feel we've even had a discussion if we're gonna change this overlay district. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
So is there a hurry to get this to planning and zoning? Can't we postpone it for another month until we get some? I agree with the mayor, the committee only met one time. I mean, there's still some stuff that's got to be worked out.
Mr. Cage.
My opinion, there is absolutely a time essence to this. We have 2 or 3 groups who are willing to submit a text amendment saying that we would request respectfully to remove the Thorndale Corridor overlay, take it off from industrial properties that are used as industrial today and will be used in the future. They were directed by myself that as we were working through this process, that this is something that the city is going to look at. Now, we have a lengthy process ahead of us in terms of the UDO, the steering committee, potential amendments, and I know everybody's going to have some great questions on that and some great input. But the Thorndale Corridor overlay has some, for want of a better description, it has a time frame on it. And again, we're not putting restrictions on people who don't have restrictions. We're taking we're anticipating taking the Thorndale corridor off 850 and 950 Edgewood. If you want to delay it, that's your prerogative. If we want to make this process take longer, that's fine. But what I'm going to tell you is, I have someone I talked to today who is in support of this, and if we are not doing it, they will do it. And it's not just one property owner, it's not just one development company. And my concern is, time is somewhat of an essence. We're in a very unstable environment. I don't need to tell everybody about that. We all know that. We have to discuss this more. We have to provide details. Absolutely. That's the whole point of this. That's the reason we're coming. Normally, we would come to this point after CDC. We're coming to you guys before to let you know we're not trying to bypass the steering committee, but it's a time-sensitive issue. Absolutely.
I think our attorney wanted to.
Yeah, just,
Comments?
on that point, there are a number of restrictions that are in there. When it was originally passed, the overlay district, I think as we heard from Mr. Blue, the economic development has changed, but those were originally optional. In other words, it was, we're looking for you to comply with these. Those were made mandatory, those restrictions, and that, making it mandatory with the shift in the nature of this type of development, caused the situation where you've got a lot of developers, and we've seen it recently where they come in and I've seen, CDC says, well, they're asking for a lot of variances or a lot of relief. Well, they have to because of the significant restrictions that are currently there. And what I think Mr. Cage is trying to do is to get something that can be brought back. And again, this is just kind of, here's what the plan is going forward. But to come back to revisit this overlay district and revisit some of the restrictions that are in the overlay district to say, okay, some of these are too restrictive. They're not going to spur the kind of economic development that this area should enjoy. 390's now built. We have an idea what that is. So by doing this, you're going to take and get what it's going to look like and what the restrictions that are there, parking and some of the other things that are very restrictive. And you've got some other uses there that may not necessarily be the type of uses that would actually come to that area, the recreation. I don't know what the ultimate plan is, but that's not going to be a recreational hub in there probably. I know that was something that was looked at in the past. So those are the types of things that need to be revisited and come up with something that's going to be less restrictive so these developers, A, don't go elsewhere, or B, come before the city and look like they're asking for a laundry list of exceptions to our city code. And the reason being because the restrictions are fairly significant with not only underlying zoning, but then the overlay district restrictions as well. So it's sort of getting to the next step. And it is somewhat timely because you've got developers, time is money. They're going to look elsewhere if they're doing it. It's not saying the city's giving away the store. It's just saying the city is evolving to meet the current economic trends.
I guess one question I would have is, before we send this to CDC, couldn't we kind of get a list of what some of these restrictions are that these developers want? So we have an idea because right now, I think some of us are clueless up here what those restrictions are that we're having problems with.
Just briefly, the use list within the corporate Main Street doesn't allow warehouse and logistics. So that affects 850, 950 Edgewood. That affects, in the packet, we have the existing Thorndale corridor overlay. The red district is the corporate Main Street. You have an industrial zone property that you can't use as an industrial use. That to me is kind of the prime example, and kind of just hearing some of the comments, I really get the sense that there's some unease in terms of moving quickly, and I think Mr. Bond raises a good point that maybe an interim step is not eliminating properties from the Thorndale corridor overlay. Maybe it's just going back to being voluntary as an interim step. Because right now, as it's mandatory, the property owners and the developers who want to develop in town, who have already developed in town, and I know have produced good results in terms of the buildings that they've done are not going to develop here. And we are a competitive community with our surrounding neighbors. You know, it doesn't take much to go up into Cook County to Elk Grove to see how many industrial buildings they're putting up. Now, you know, everybody has a place in the competitive market. We have some clear advantages. We're in DuPage County, which is huge. We also have a council who approved height variance, which has been brought up numerous times by the development community, which is a huge advantage. And we have a development process that is quicker and more efficient than maybe some of our neighbors to the west. So we have a lot of advantages. The reason I'm bringing this up and making it known is that we don't want to lessen those advantages. So maybe there's an interim step. I don't want the council to feel that we're pushing things forward when you're not comfortable with it. So really, the key component right now is the corporate Main Street, especially in the Thorndale Corridor overlay, being a mandatory requirement. That is effectively putting the development or redevelopment or a new use going to an existing building is not currently allowed, and that's the issue.
Mr.
If I
Bond?
could just follow up on that. And there was and I know there's been more than one attorney's raised the issue that, you know, when you're taking this property and you're essentially eliminating the property owner's rights to be able to use that property for what should otherwise be uses that would be acceptable. Saying it's a take, which means that we're depriving them of the use without the due process of law or compensation or anything. I don't think it reaches that far. But it certainly has been raised, and to the extent that you've got properties that under the zoning, the type of use they want to put it to can't because of these additional restrictions. And again, when they became compulsory, that really, I think, changed the enforcement of this, because now staff has no latitude, so the developers have to make a request for all these different variations or go elsewhere. So. But I don't think it rises to the level of being a legal taking of the property, but it does certainly compromise their ability to put that property to the highest and best use, which is sort of the standard.
Okay. Alderman Catalano, you had your hand up before. I know you haven't asked any questions yet.
The other advantage, of course, that we have, we all know, is the 390, western access to O'Hare. Is there a timeline and when what's going on with that? As far as,
Oh, I've not heard anything.
right,
I'm talking about the construction.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Mayor?
They hope to have that completed by, 2025? North and south legs, I believe. So everything should be into the airport, connected to the south and the north by 2025. I believe they're on schedule, but those meetings have also been postponed due to COVID, so we haven't had an update in about 6 months.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Alderman Woods?
Thank you. Yeah. So I agree with Mr. Cage. This is something that we need to move forward, right? They got to strike while the irons are hot. It's a competitive market out there. My biggest concern, I'll say it again, I don't want to be the guy picking winners and losers. If we're only carving out a little niche, that at least visually looks like I'm giving favor to somebody over somebody else. If you're telling me ultimately we're going to take, you said that area, just for sake of conversations, 100 acres, if we're going to take 60 acres out of the overlay district, why can't we do that now? I would hate to watch some people benefit now, and the other people are sitting on the other side of the road going, well, I can't say what they'd be saying, but they wouldn't be happy, right? Because why is that guy getting that advantage, and I have the same issue over here? So is that something we can put on the table? I get the moving forward, I get all those pieces, I agree. I think everybody's covered that. The big piece for me is to be consistent, and if we're going to make a move, make the one move as opposed to multiple interim moves, which is just going to piss many people off.
Right.
Mr. Cage?
Excellent point. getting wrapped up in the zoning stuff. I hadn't anticipated that point of view, but I completely agree. We don't want to favorize one person over another. So if we were to eliminate the whole Thorndale corridor overlay, that would be a fairer approach. I was being a bit more kind of
Cautious.
cautious, thank you. Yes. Because I know that some people on the council were here when it was established, spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money on it. So I didn't want to throw everything out but if that's an option, I think that resolves the problem, and then we're not picking winners and losers. So would we be prepared to do that? Absolutely. That's a good idea.
I mean, and that's just my opinion, being on the development side, and being fair across the board, because it's not fair to pull 5 properties out, and the other guy's investing in property, buying properties, or owning properties, or wanting to move from one property to the other, which there are people in town, they'd be going, all right, well, I don't want that building, but this building, so if you would have moved it over there, I would have moved over there.
Right.
So, everybody else, I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, but.
I agree.
Mayor?
Timing's good. Yeah. The only thing want to say is, so we've been told that basically this industrial park was built 40, 50 years, it's obsolete, right? Dock doors in the front and things like that. And we created this overlay district that may be a step, so like you said, office buildings are gone, right? The old household is history, right? So we made a change there, right? We allowed those buildings to go in. And we need the change, but I want to make sure we don't also cripple, like, you know, if you keep it the same, you're not gonna get the new developments, right? You're gonna have all these small, you know, I don't want to say orphan properties, but
Well, I mean,
outdated.
we can make, I guess,
That's all.
we can make the motion.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Mr. Murmas?
Yeah, I just think what staff is trying to say is what has happened is the overlay, those developments that we're getting, like the forest base or all these other developments, they're not following the overlay anyway.
Correct.
So we're providing them to go through an additional loop that's useless for everybody at this point. So that's why we're here tonight, to eliminate that extra hoop, because it's not being followed anyway, and we're getting good developments in spite of the overlay district, but we're getting those good developments with a lot more effort than really needs to be there, and jumping through more hurdles than we need to jump through. And as Mr. Cage stated, you know, some developer may not want to jump through those hurdles, go to a neighboring community, maybe they make it quicker, maybe they don't, I don't know. All I know is all the developments we've recently had, they don't follow the overlay district anyway. So that's kind of why we're here.
I guess I have a question for Attorney Bond. So Alderman Woods is basically, I mean, could we
It's not a motion.
make a motion to, of similar to what Alderman Woods was talking about, and pass it?
We
And
give guidance.
Yeah, you would give direction, you can't, there's no action you could take with respect to that. That would then go through what it reverts back to and so forth, which, and there's some notice issues and things of that nature. You certainly can, as a committee, say we support the elimination of that, or starting over, whatever it is. So at least staff has direction, and then they can go to the CDC next week, or whenever it is on October 19th, and share the, you know, where the council's at. But that would be all we'd be able to do, is give you a recommendation or recommendation to the staff.
Mr. Murmas?
Well, the normal process for something like this would have just been that we take it to CDC. It had gone through, it had been mentioned and ratified by the council in the comprehensive plan. From the comprehensive plan, we engaged with TESCA, and they would have done their work groups. Now, this was not a major component of one of the work groups, but this obviously had been brought up to the council. When Mr. Cage brought this up to me, I said, no, we can't go straight to CDC. This is a big topic. We need to do one of those cursory reviews at committee. So that's why we're here tonight. If there's input or thoughts on the process here, then that would be appropriate. We don't need an official motion, as Attorney Bond had said, but that's why we're here, to bring it to you, because I had the feeling that maybe some of you had forgotten about this, that it was forthcoming, and then just it magically appearing at CDC probably would not have been a good route, which is why we're here tonight.
Correct.
Mayor?
The only thing I'm asking is, so if you've got the guidance, right? We definitely want to move forward, and we want things to move forward. But if you get rid of the overlays, everything go back to I-1, and everything is allowed, and some certain things you just don't like.
Mr. Cage?
Excellent point, Matt. So, as part of the UDO rewrite, one of the key components, and this is going back probably even a year, one of the first things that we, Mr. Blue and myself and Ansel Blink talked about was our use group. A use group in the UDO is interesting, for want of a better description. We have the key component to the UDO update from a staff standpoint was to provide a better list of uses that are appropriate, that are acceptable. And right now, we don't have that. And that's not just in I-1 or I-2 or C-1 or C-2 or C-3. We have some significant issues with the uses and some of the zoning districts. Now, that's a whole nother conversation that we will be having with you guys, the subcommittee, steering committee, and the CDC. That is coming. But yeah, one of the things you guys make an excellent point is, what does that do to the uses? It significantly alters them, right? Because right now what you have is, you have a Thorndale corridor overlay that limits some people from using the industrial property as industrial. Now, some people are using industrial properties for something really, and just in my opinion, which is far more intense than what I-1 intends it to be. And so some of those things we have to look at. The key here is that we're not eliminating something or changing something that allows someone to suddenly, let's just say, have a 1 acre outdoor storage area that's not screened. I know that's not what the council wants. So I think what we'll do is take this information, have probably a Zoom meeting with the manager, Attorney Bond, Mr. Blue, and kind of work out what those parameters are, because we don't want to, on the one hand, we want to be open to business and new development, but we don't want to open the floodgates to things that we know, or that I know that the council is not looking for.
Yeah, so essentially, you just have to move the process forward. It's going to CDC, as Manager Murmas indicated. It's going, to give you a reminder of how we got here, maybe a little history of the, from recommended to compulsory restrictions, the limitations that they're experienced. So it's really, ends up in the process. I think Mr. Cage has delineated what the process is moving forward. Certainly have some input on that, but really to get it moving, to get to the next step, it just needs to go to the CDC. And so there's no formal motion required, but if the council or the committee wants to say, yeah, we concur, this needs to be addressed, and we think taking it to CDC is a good idea. That's really the only thing you would need is a motion to concur with staff to move forward with revisiting this and addressing some of the modern day development issues and bringing it into conformance with those.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, just one last comment. So being fair or equal, eliminating the overlay or not eliminating it, I mean, we have to cover all the issues, the ones that the mayor brought up, the ones that Peter, Randy, Eugene have brought up, right? There's some uses that the community doesn't want. So do we shrink that, or do we just change the inner workings of the overlay so that it's more flexible to meet the new demand or the new desire for the area? That's for you guys to figure out. My big thing is that it has to be fair and open for everybody else. The rest of it, what we want and what we don't want. I think you've been around long enough, and if you figure it wrong, well, maybe you'll feel it.
Okay.
I think everybody's on board. That's all you need.
Okay.
Unless somebody objects.
Does anyone object to? Okay, next, items to be considered at future meetings. There are none. I make a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
I'd like to call the order of the Public Works Committee. Minute taker, take note that the same council members are present. And I'll make the motion to approve the minutes of September 24th, 2020, Public Works Committee meeting. That is my motion.
Second.
Any corrections? If there are none, the motion carries. Next is a report and recommendation, and it's approval of an agreement with G. Fisher Commercial Construction, Inc. for the Police Department Security Wall and Parking Lot Improvement Project in the amount not to exceed $675,000. That is my motion.
Second.
Any questions?
No. We can't give it a question.
Well, I've got a question. So the parking lot, that's going to be taken care of this year, as far as the asphalt?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then when the security wall, when's that going to take place?
It's proposed to try to take place all within this year. There was some concerns through the bidding process that material delays would push back the actual structure itself, but the piers and everything leading up to, as far as just bolting down the structure for the overhead parking garage area, would then be able to be bolted in place quickly going into after the winter season.
Okay. Any other questions? Alderman Woods?
Yeah, do we have any nice slides showing what that looks like?
Yeah, so we were gonna touch base on some of the previous drainage concerns of the parking lot itself and the need, not only from a safety standpoint, but also a maintenance operations standpoint. I started in February. One of my first calls that I thought I was getting pranked on was to go salt City Hall parking lot, and there hadn't been any precipitation whatsoever. So I quickly learned that there was a subsurface drainage concerns. So it's not only unforeseen and maybe unexpected for people walking in the lot when there's no precipitation, there could be ice on the ground, but it's also an added level of maintenance, salting operation that we have to do outside of snow itself. The lot, as you can see too, is in deplorable condition, kind of resurfacing with it without updating the drainage underneath it would further degrade a brand new surface. So this project was put in the CIP. We decided to move forward with it. It kind of then made sense to incorporate other site work that is in need through police. And Chief Ezra is going to talk a little bit more. I'll say the covered parking areas will help our operations and public works as well in terms of snow removal. It is getting extended out a little bit further, so it'll help with trucks getting through there if we do have to salt, because it will still be not heated. It'll, elements can kind of get through there a little bit, but it will give that added protection to police when they're changing shifts, cleaning cars, as well as I know police cars have a tight turnaround on their lifespan, but the components we really try to salvage, and keeping them out of that constant weather, sunlight, is all that much better when we do transfer it to new vehicles and try to extend the life of all that additional equipment. Along with the vinyl wraps that we put on the cars is, it can be sensitive to the sunlight, so if they are out of that sunlight for that additional amount of time, it's always a benefit. So there's also some overhead vision concerns and site security with any future development to the south of us. If Chief S, you want to touch on?
Yeah, Mayor, did you have a question?
Yeah, in the parking lot
Go
before we
ahead.
go over to the chief's exciting presentation.
Right.
That parking lot, I think, was done about 10 years ago. We always seem to have draining issues. I mean, 10 years for a newly paved parking lot doesn't seem like, especially when there's mostly cars driving through there.
Correct.
I think this is engineering standards coming up.
We did repave the parking lot some time ago, and
But 10 years.
if the council remembers too, we had a drainage problem at the other side of the parking lot
Right.
that was repaired and fixed, and we did take care of that problem. But this problem with the icing over in the winter is becoming almost, doubly worse, like every year. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but it gets significantly worse every season.
Should we be adding a drain over there or something?
Go ahead.
So the improvements proposed is adding additional drainage throughout the entirety of the parking lot. And then it's tying into existing storm sewer, so it will alleviate a lot of the subsurface drainage that's existing. And I tried to get an explanation from the civil engineers. Really, they think there's a level of clay that's not allowing any surface water or water that's kind of standing at a level just below the pavement to drain properly. And it's kind of coming out on that western portion is a little bit lower than the eastern side of the lot, and kind of finding its way to grade and causing these icy conditions.
Chief, you?
So on the security wall improvements and stuff, so this is just the overhead, just a couple of things we're looking to do with it is currently, this is where we have our electric gate operator. All of our traffic is in and out of there. For a long time, we've wanted to allow the ability to come in and out of this location with an electric operated gate, so that was proposed as part of this project. The area we're really talking about is down here on the south side of the parking lot. There would be a new sound separation wall that would run all the way through the end of the annex, and then a covered canopy that would cover the current parking areas. Another part of it does include spraying insulation on the top of the range, and that was based on, I don't know if council remembers, we had some residents that currently live over here that had some problems with the times of night that we were shooting. So we did make some modifications, but it really is just plywood and then the shingles. So while we're doing this, contemplating, of course, any other future development that's in the area, as a courtesy to the neighbors, is a very small portion of this project is a spray-in sound dampening insulation in the top of the range too. Here's kind of the side view if you were pulling into it. There will be a precast concrete wall over here, and then this is a crude drawing that I have here, but a steel roofing that will tilt slightly towards the station, and then ending approximately where the current ending is. The other important thing is we're picking up about 3 or 4 more feet on the south end of the lot, and that's going to allow us much easier for parking and getting in and out. So that's kind of what it would look like from the south side. This is the current police station here, and then this would be the covered structure. It would run all the way to this area, this is our sally port where prisoners are brought in, and kind of cover that. So the reason we're not going all the way to the structure is because we have 2 communications towers that would have to be relocated, a ComEd transformer that would have to be relocated, and then of course any connection to the building would require a lot more structural work, sprinkling, and other types of requirements. So just the reasons, we've talked about this a few times, extending the parking lot, adding security, previously possible developments. That's why this did come up again as while we're doing it. We would expand the parking lot by 3 to 4 feet, provide additional security, add that electric gate on both entrances. And the big thing is we're cognizant of is we have constant traffic in and out all hours of the night, 3 shifts a day. We're testing our lights and sirens over there. Anything with future development would allow for views directly into our current administrative and detectives offices, which we would want to avoid. And of course, officer safety concerns and vulnerability. It's really not a very good protected location, that was something that was identified several years ago when we were going to redo the fence, was to add some type of visual security over there too. And as I mentioned, the soundproofing into the roof of the range. So as this project was coming up, we thought it was a good time to look at the overall project and then consolidate it into whatever. And then the next video I have is just kind of an illustration of, we do have a chain link fence over there, but there really is no security with it. And thank God there was video for this, because I don't think the insurance companies or the city manager would have believed what actually happened. But this was an incident that happened in our parking lot a few years ago. Yeah, so believe it or not, I was sitting right inside the one door in there, and we wonder what the heck happened. But
It is, it's just a chain link fence, it's a visual deterrent, it's really not a security fence for us, and that was just something that kind of highlighted it, so. Any questions?
Mayor?
Where were they trying to go?
Well, what we think was this was a elderly gentleman. They had some type of medical episode or confusion as to which pedal he was going to be doing when the bank was open. And yeah, he took out 3 cars with that incident.
Mayor?
Chief, you mentioned the roof was slightly tilted towards the building. Does that mean the water's gonna drain towards the building and not away from the building?
It will
Go ahead.
be tied into a gutter system that will then go underground into the existing storm sewer and feed into the storm sewer out in the lot and where it goes currently.
And what the engineer did describe to us when talking about it, it's not going to be a steep slant, but a slight slant, as opposed to shedding all that water onto the neighboring property in the future. So just to avoid any future problems with that.
Go ahead, follow.
Well, I just wanna make sure that we're not gonna have a constant waterfall when the officers are trying to.
Right, no, that will be guttered over there and then drained out.
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Yeah, on that city parking lot, I thought a couple of years ago, we had someone look at that water in that parking lot. I believe it was
So
BMW.
I'll even just mention it just because I know so well where it was right up in here. This is where we had a lot of water before,
Right.
and that was repaired, and there is no leaking up there. This whole area, you'll see it, it looks like Yellowstone with about 8 or 10 different locations where you can see the water's coming up. If you go out there right now, it hasn't rained since, Saturday? You can literally hear the water running into the drain.
Wow.
It's that much water there.
Okay. Alderman Messina?
Yeah, just a couple questions. I noticed there was 16 people that submitted bids. Was that for this consolidated project or the original?
Good.
So it was bid out altogether, the parking lot along with the police department upgrades, and yeah, it was 16 bids on all that work together, so it was a great outcome.
Go ahead.
Well, so on the lowest bidder, I think it was Fisher, right? I saw 2 numbers. I saw 672 and then a 675, I think was the winning. So not that it matters because it's minimal, but I noticed that they said 672 and then there was other engineering and other things that needed to happen. So how'd you guys come to that
So
672?
their bid amount was 675. The 672 was the overall project estimate, and
Okay.
that was a little before a few additional items got tacked on. So that 672 is the engineering / architectural estimate for the project before a few additional items got tacked on, and the 675 was the bid amount.
And
Go
part
ahead.
of that was the
Insulation, right?
sorry, the insulation. And then right in here, if you'll notice now, there's just grass here. It really makes no sense to continue cutting that grass, so it was contemplated as we were doing the site visits to just fill that in with concrete there.
Okay.
Okay. Alderman Sosnowski, did you have a?
No, the mayor answered.
Okay. Alderman Jacob?
Are we also repaving all the parking lot where the police cars are?
Did you say painting the parking spots?
No, the whole parking lot where the police cars are, that's all being repaved too, correct?
Yes, the whole thing's being repaved, including this area too.
And then did you show a sprinkler system or something before? I thought I saw.
Dry.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
dry.
Car wash, Peter.
And since it's not going all the way, so are the cars going to be covered all the way? I mean, the cars aren't going to be getting wet and full of snow anymore, correct? Because it looks like, yeah, I mean, you had said it's not going all the way, so.
Correct. This is approximately what it's going to look like here. I think they were actually able to push this even a little bit further than this in the final design. This was originally the preliminary design. So it doesn't mean you're not going to get any flurries in on here because we just can't connect to the station without probably tripling the cost of the project, at a minimum doubling. So the engineers have come up with a recommendation of separating that. But, you know, you might get some overflow weather in there, but it's certainly going to be very minimal.
Okay, thank you.
Well, any other questions? Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, right? Roll call, please.
Alderman Jacob.
Yes.
Alderman Woods.
Yes.
Alderman Sismarski.
Yes.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Catalano.
Yes.
Alderman Messina.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, next is items to consider at future meetings. We have the Veterans Memorial Landscaping coming up fall or winter. And we have the wind sculptures lighting, and that's coming up October 22nd, 2020. And then we have the 50/50 apron program also coming up October 22nd. And last is the senior grass cutting program coming this winter. Any other items to consider? If there are none, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Grass cutting. So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we adjourn. Thank you.
I'd like to call the Finance and Administration Committee to order. Let the minute taker reflect that the same members are present. First, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of September 24th.
Second.
Any questions, corrections, changes? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next, report and recommendation, Bridgepoint Wooddale Bike Path. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I think we're all familiar with the Bridgepoint project, the forward space, and then the additional building to the north. As part of that PUD for that project, the developer had agreed to install a bike path. That bike path was going to provide connectivity to the larger Salt Creek Greenway Trail. And then, as we also know, that connects to the Illinois Prairie Path and the Great Western Trail systems. I looked it up, that's about 111 miles of paths through this part of the state. It's a great system. And the city, we try when we can to add those connection points and that connectivity to those trails, and those mobility portals. During the construction design, there was some unforeseen issues with 3 ComEd poles to the south portion of that, around those ponds. So with that, ComEd submitted a proposal to them that was in the packet for approximately $126,000. Since that was a little bit more than they were expecting to pay, they reached out to the city to possibly go in and help share in that cost, as that area is in the TIF, and that was an eligible and allowable expense for the TIF. Staff had suggested going in 50/50, not to exceed $63,000 for the city's portion. And it would be a reimbursement, so if the project comes in at, say, $50,000, then we would, or excuse me, $100,000, we would put in $50,000. If it winds up at $130 or $140, we would be capped at the $63. So there would be some downside gains, but no upside exposure to the city. So when going through this, I kind of was trying to figure out where these poles were. I knew roughly where they were. The area in question, not sure which one's the laser, no, is really right down here is where these poles are. But as you can see, the existing network and then where that trail connection is going to be. So Mr. Cage was kind enough to go out, get a few pictures. So here it is looking north from one of the entrances. See a nice wide bike path, very lovely. Looking south, still looking good. As you go further south though, it looks a little dicey. And then when you get here, you can see that as currently constructed with the trees, the ponds, and then the poles, you can't get the full width of that bike path in there. So if you go out there now, you'd see kind of where the path ends, and then those next 3 poles are where the conflict occurs between there going south to Foster. So that's the area in question that they're looking for that relief on. So like I said, I think it's a really good project. Everybody's excited to get the bike path, and again, it is allowable expense within the TIF that we'd use TIF funding on. So that's why staff came up with this recommendation and brought it forward to you this evening. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Well, there being no questions, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. That was
All, do we need roll call? or no? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next, property casualty insurance broker RFQ. I can't wait.
Let me take a sip of my coffee.
Art? Be recognized, please.
Oh, sure. Alderman Jacob?
I'm going to recuse myself from this vote and this discussion.
What, do you work for them?
Okay, Mr. Wilson.
Oh,
We're
thank you.
down one, but continue. They're dropping like flies up here.
Still got 5, so I think we're good. We still do
Yeah,
business.
no, we're
I think
good.
his company responded.
So I'll make this as brief as I can. I know it's a very exciting topic.
Thank you.
The the RFQ for the property and casualty insurance brokerage services was one of the ones that was identified in the strategic plan. So this would be the third such bid that has been sent out. You might remember the utility bill print, that was number 1. Technically, the banking one went out before, but it's coming back later. And then we have this one, and then investments is next month. So we are getting through those late this year. In spite of COVID, we are still banging through them. You know, there was no particular issue with the current provider, the current vendor. But again, just through the process, want to kick the tires, check pricing, make sure, you know, there's nothing else out there that we're missing. So we sent it out to 3 agencies, to Mesereau Alliant, Gallagher, and Assurance. Gallagher and Mesereau both responded, Assurance did not. And they didn't give us a reason for not responding, they just declined to respond. Going through the proposals, their approach, the form and function were very, very similar. At the end of the day, both of the price quotations we were provided were lower than what we're paying currently. And the current provider, again, you know, we have a good working relationship with them, and, you know, all things being equal, cost being lower, staff didn't feel that there was any reason to switch just for the sake of switching. So we are recommending staying with Alliant Mesereau for these brokerage services.
Alderman Wesley, you have a question?
So prices were all the same, or?
Mr. Wilson?
No, they were both lower than what we're currently paying in our current arrangement. So the current vendor was Mesereau with this RFP process,
Right.
dropped their price, which is one of the likely benefits of sending things out to bid on occasion is to have them sharpen their pencils, as we all know.
So they'll be lower, I'm sorry. They'll be lower than last year then?
The price that we're paying to them will be, yes. We can't guarantee that the cost of the coverage will be less, but their fee will be less, yes.
Alderman Messina?
To that point, don't be fooled, I just had this conversation with my own insurance company, so they may change some of the coverage rates. Is that what I'm hearing? So our rate may go down, but are you saying the coverage amounts for certain things may go down?
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, sorry if that was confusing. No, so their fee is going to be a fixed fee for the
Okay.
amount that's listed in the memo at $39,500.
Yep.
All I'm just saying is, as we all know, insurance rates go up over time, not down over time. That's all I was saying. So
Okay.
the coverage is based on the claims experience, will likely appreciate over time, but the fee that they're charging us to assist us in retaining those coverages is going to be less than what they were charging us in previous years.
Understood, sorry.
Good question.
No further question? Oh. Mary, you have a question?
Brad, since you didn't put up a slide, what were those 2 prices?
Oh, sure.
What were we paying and?
39.5.
Yeah, so the proposal from Alliant Mesereau is $39,500, and the estimated fee from Gallagher was $45,000.
But what were we paying before?
Give or take $50,000.
Okay. Just for the residents at home?
Yeah, so about a little over $10,000 savings.
Just by taking.
Alderman Messina?
So just by opening this up for RFP, we were able to have, see that savings? So,
Mr.
maybe-
Wilson?
Sorry, this is a question maybe for Pat. It's something like this, right? I think we ran into this with the garbage contract, right? It's like, ta-da, we caught you I don't know the correct word, so I'll be careful on what I say, but like, okay, they are clearly overcharging, we'll say maybe at the time, I don't know, better word, but here we are out to bid, and they're much less. Do we have the ability to choose another vendor that's higher, or are we bound by the lowest bidder?
Mr. Bond?
Yeah, you're not bound by the lowest bidder. The nature of the services, you look at the full scope of it, and there's a marginal difference between the two. There are contracts where you are required to take the lowest responsible bidder.
Okay.
And the question becomes what's responsible, and when you look at that, you look at the history. Does the city have a history with one vendor or another? Does the city know of history with other communities with one vendor or another? Taking all those into consideration, and as Mr. Wilson said, the working relationship with the current broker and the claims that we've had. Insurance is like, your homeowners or your auto insurance. You have, accidents, it's gonna go up with your claims. But the brokers they're basically shopping it on behalf of the city. So, I don't know if there was necessarily overcharging. There's been a shift somewhat of a shift in the market, and the fact you only got two is kind of interesting. That there was a couple of claims, obviously, that the city experienced, so that maybe shies some people away from that. So, but I mean, you have to take into consideration all those factors to make the determination as to which is the lowest responsible bidder.
Okay.
As opposed to just.
Mr. Murmas, you wanted to?
Yeah, this may
weigh in?
change Alderman Messina's take on things. We did actually bid this out the last time. So it wasn't like this company just made up a price and then they were kind of ripping us off. The price was too high, I think you're alluding to. But we bid this the initial time, so this is not just a new bid for this service. We had bid it the last time as well, and they were the low bidder last time. So whatever external circumstances happened to cause them to do a better bid this time is what it is. I don't know what those external circumstances were. And I would note that this is a strategic plan priority for the council. We haven't just started doing this, we've been doing this, so when you want us to do these things, like bidding these things out, obviously, over time, we've saved quite a bit of money by doing this, and this wasn't the first time this was bid out, if that's what you were asking.
That's good, thank you.
Okay. No further questions? Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? That passes. Next items to be considered at future meetings, bank RFP, October 22nd, 2020. Is there anything else anybody would like to put on? There being none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
We're done.